There is a plant that defies everything you were taught about food. It produces more calories than corn. It thrives in climates that destroy wheat, and once you put it in the ground, it feeds you forever without replanting, without fertilizer, without permission. For centuries, it kept entire civilizations alive through famines that killed millions. Then it vanished from our tables. Not because it stopped working, because it worked too well. A crop that multiplies without being bought, that survives without being managed, that spreads without being controlled, cannot generate profit, and what cannot be monetized must be forgotten. This is the story of the perennial that fed empires, survived genocides, and still grows wild in the ditch behind your house. If you care about food that cannot be taken from you, subscribe now. This information has been buried for reasons you are about to understand. Hit subscribe and share this before it disappears again. The vault opens in 1605 along the Atlantic coast. French explorer Samuel de Champlain steps onto land that will become Massachusetts. The Algonquin tribes greet him with ceremony and food. Among the offerings is a gnarled root they call Kaishukpanok, the sun root. Champlain bites into it. The taste stops him. Sweet, nutty, crisp. He writes that it equals the finest artichokes of European nobility. Before he sails home, he fills his ship's cargo hold with these knobby tubers. The plant is Helianthus tuberosus. English settlers will corrupt its name into Jerusalem artichoke. The French will call it topinambour. Germans will know it as erdbeeren, earth pear. But none of these names explain what it truly is, a survival technology disguised as a vegetable. The Iroquois knew the origin story. When Earth Woman died in childbirth, her body became the first crops. From her hands grew beans, from her heart grew corn, and from her feet, where she last touched the soil, grew the sunchoke. A gift born from the ultimate sacrifice. The plant towers like a giant, 8 feet tall, 10 feet in rich soil, crowned with bright yellow flowers that track the sun from dawn to dusk like solar panels made of petals. But the real miracle happens underground, invisible. The roots spread horizontally, creating tubers at their tips, white ones, purple ones, gold, each one storing energy as inulin instead of starch, a chemical trick that changes everything. Tribes from the Great Lakes to the Atlantic planted it once and harvested forever. The plant did not need to be replanted. Underground rhizomes spread like a neural network. One patch could expand to feed a village for generations without anyone planting a single seed. The three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, required annual planting. Sunchokes required only patience. Leave them in the ground. They waited, through winter freezes, through spring floods, ready whenever hunger arrived. When Lewis and Clark crossed the Dakotas in 1805, winter nearly killed them. Snow buried everything. Buffalo had migrated. Hunting parties returned empty-handed. Sacagawea saved the expedition with knowledge, not weapons. She found prairie dog burrows and mouse dens. Inside were caches. Thousands of sunchoke tubers gathered by animals preparing for winter. She dug them out, roasted them over fire, fed the starving men. The journals record it. November 7th, 1805. Sacagawea gathered a quantity of roots resembling small potatoes. When roasted, they are palatable and nutritious. The explorers did not understand what they were eating. Food that required no farming. No planting season, no harvest window, just knowledge of where it grew and the willingness to dig. The yield was beyond anything Europe had seen. A single sunchoke plant produces 3 to 6 pounds of food. An acre yields more calories than wheat, more nutrition than corn in northern climates where corn struggles. Agricultural studies done centuries later confirmed what indigenous peoples knew. 64,000 pounds per acre without irrigation. Potatoes in ideal conditions with irrigation yielded 53,000. This was not just food, This was insurance against extinction. When Champlain brought sunchokes to France, Europe was dying slowly. Centuries of wheat and rye had exhausted the soil. Famines struck every decade. The potato had arrived from South America, but people feared it. Rumors said it caused leprosy. Priests called it an agent of the devil because it was not mentioned in the Bible. But sunchokes faced no such fear. The French aristocracy ate them at banquets. Peasants planted them in fields where nothing else would grow. No fertilizer needed. No careful tending. Push a tuber into dirt in spring. Dig up 20 in fall. Leave fragments behind, and next year a full crop appears like magic. The Italian name was girasole, sunflower. English tongues corrupted it to Jerusalem. The name stuck, confusing and wrong. It had nothing to do with the holy city, but the plant did not care what humans called it. It just grew. By the 1600s, sunchokes were feeding millions across Europe. University studies in later centuries would prove the numbers. 30,000 pounds per acre. Potatoes in the same soil, 20,000. Calorie for calorie, sunchokes rivaled corn, the crop that built civilizations. And unlike corn, they required almost no work. But there was a problem. Not with the plant, with the system. The tubers were small, knobby, irregular shapes that were difficult to clean. Dirt clung to every crevice. They did not store as long as potatoes, 2 months instead of 6. They could not sit in warehouses waiting for prices to rise. And the inulin, the same compound that made them nutritious, caused gas in people who ate them frequently. By 1750, the potato had won. Larger tubers, smoother skin, longer storage. It fit perfectly into the systems Europe had built. Centralized markets, tax collection, warehouses, merchants who bought cheap and sold high. The sunchoke could not be controlled the same way. It spread without permission. It fed people without markets. So it was demoted. Food for the poor, feed for pigs, a crop for those with nothing better. In North America, European settlers saw it growing wild and called it a weed. They preferred crops that required buying seed every spring. Crops that needed fertilizer sold by companies. Crops that created dependence. The sunchoke created independence. It could not be sold year after year. Plant it once, and you never needed the seed seller again. So it was forgotten. Pushed to ditches, roadsides, the margins, waiting. Then, November 1914. World War I begins. By 1916, Germany is strangled by a British naval blockade. No food shipments in, no fertilizer, crops fail, the potato harvest collapses. That winter becomes known as Steckrüben winter, the turnip winter. People ate rutabagas meant for livestock because there was nothing else. Hundreds of thousands died. But some survived on sunchokes. They grew wild in abandoned fields, along railroad tracks, in forgotten corners where no one had cultivated them for decades. They could not be blockaded, could not be requisitioned by the army. Just there, underground, waiting for desperate hands. The tubers kept families alive when the entire food system collapsed. But the hunger left scars. When the war ended, Germans wanted to forget. Forget the taste of animal feed. Forget the shame of digging in dirt like beggars. The sunchoke became a symbol of defeat. Then 20 years later, it happened again. Worse, World War II. In 1940, Nazi forces occupy France. They seize 80% of all food production. Potatoes go to German soldiers. What remains for French families are vegetables once fed to pigs. Topinambour, rutabagas, turnips. For 4 years, millions of French citizens survive on these despised crops. The tubers are boiled, mashed, fried, roasted, eaten for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because there is nothing else. The inulin causes terrible gas. Families cannot sit together without humiliation. Children cry from stomach cramps, but they stay alive. The Nazi hunger plan is deliberate. Seize food from occupied territories. Ship it to Germany. Let the conquered populations starve. Millions die in Poland, Ukraine, and Greece. But sunchokes cannot be controlled. They are too hardy, too wild. They grow in bombed-out gardens, in parks, along riversides. They just keep growing. In the Netherlands, winter 1944 becomes the Hongerwinter, the Hunger Winter. Nazi forces block all food transport in retaliation for a railway strike. 22,000 people starve to death. Families burn furniture for warmth and boil tulip bulbs for food. The government prints emergency cookbooks listing wild plants, dandelions, nettles, sunchokes. People dig frozen ground with bare hands looking for any tuber that might be hiding. Those who find them survive. Those who do not die. After liberation in 1945, survivors refused to touch topinambur ever again. An entire generation associates it with death, with occupation, with the worst years in human history. In France, grandmothers who survived forbid it in their homes. Never again. The vegetable that saved millions becomes a symbol of trauma. It disappears from markets, from cookbooks, from seed catalogs, from collective memory. But the plant doesn't care about human trauma. It keeps growing wild, waiting. Because what sunchokes are does not change based on human emotion. 73 calories per 100 grams, 2 grams of protein, potassium at 429 milligrams, more than bananas, iron for blood, copper for enzymes, magnesium for nerves, B vitamins for energy. But the real power is inulin, 50 to 60% by weight, one of the richest sources on Earth. Inulin is a prebiotic fiber. It passes through your stomach undigested, reaches your colon intact. There, beneficial bacteria feast. Bifidobacterium and lactobacillus multiply. They produce short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, acetate, propionate. These compounds lower colon pH, blocking pathogenic bacteria. They help your body absorb calcium and magnesium that would otherwise pass through unused. Studies in the 1990s showed inulin consumption reduces constipation, boosts immune function, may prevent colon cancer by keeping cells healthy and blocking mutations before they start. And unlike potatoes, sunchokes do not spike blood sugar. Potatoes are pure starch. They convert to glucose fast. Insulin surges, blood sugar crashes. Sunchokes release energy slowly. The inulin converts to fructose gradually. Diabetics in the 1980s wrote letters to health magazines. They said they ate sunchokes daily and their insulin requirements dropped by half. Folk medicine validated by science decades later, and the plant heals more than bodies. It heals land. Sunchokes are perennial. Their roots live year after year. No tilling required. Tilling destroys soil structure, kills fungi, and releases carbon. Perennials build soil. Their deep roots crack compacted hardpan. They pull nutrients from deep layers annuals cannot reach. They tolerate drought because roots go down 6 feet. They survive cold to -30 Celsius. Where wheat dies, sunchokes thrive. They were designed by nature for chaos, for survival, for persistence. In 1960s California, a produce wholesaler named Frida Kaplan stared at a bin of knobby tubers gathering dust. Nobody was buying. The name was killing sales, Jerusalem artichoke. Confusing, wrong, not from Jerusalem, not an artichoke. The Italian word girasole, meaning sunflower, had been mangled by English speakers into Jerusalem. Frida understood branding. In 1980, she trademarked a new name, sunchoke. Simple, accurate. She packaged them in 1-pound bags with recipes. Sales jumped 600%. Chefs discovered them. The flavor was unique, nutty, sweet, crisp when raw like water chestnuts, creamy when cooked like the finest potatoes. High-end restaurants in San Francisco and New York added them to menus. Sunchoke soup, roasted sunchoke sides, pureed into sauces. They were exotic, novel, forgotten and rediscovered. But something bigger was stirring. In the 1980s, the American farm crisis hit. Midwest farmers were drowning in debt. Corn and soybean prices collapsed. Foreclosures swept through Iowa, Nebraska, and Illinois. Some farmers looked for alternatives, crops that did not require expensive inputs, perennials that did not need replanting. Sun chokes seemed perfect. High yields, perennial growth, and inulin could be fermented into ethanol for fuel. Energy independence, food independence, freedom from corporate supply chains. Trials began. The yields were real, 60,000 pounds per acre, but there was no market, no processing infrastructure. Grocery stores wanted potatoes, ethanol plants wanted corn because the subsidies were designed for corn. Farmers lost money. The experiment died, but the idea survived. A crop for self-sufficiency, for communities that refuse corporate control. In France, something unexpected happened. Decades after the war, young chefs started reclaiming topinambur, not as a symbol of suffering, as heritage, as a forgotten vegetable with unique flavor and deep roots in French soil. By the 2000s, it appeared in farmers' markets across Europe and North America. Permaculture advocates called it the Holy Grail. One planting, forever harvests, soil building, perennial abundance. Today, agricultural scientists study sun chokes for marginal lands, places where climate change is killing wheat and corn, drought zones, flood zones, extreme cold. The sun choke waits, born in chaos, built for extremes. So why do we not see it everywhere? Why is it not in every supermarket, every backyard? The answer is the same reason it was forgotten. Industrial agriculture demands uniformity, crops that ripen on the same day, harvest by machine, ship without bruising, store for months, look perfect under fluorescent lights. Sunchokes refuse every single requirement. They mature at different times on the same plant. Some tubers ready in September, others in November. Mechanical potato harvesters destroy half of them. Too small, too attached to roots. Efficient harvest requires specialized equipment nobody manufactures, or hand labor, neither scales, neither generates profit. And the inulin problem persists. What makes sun chokes nutritionally superior also causes gas in people unaccustomed to them. The gut bacteria need time to adapt. 2 weeks, a month. Start small. Eat a few. Let your microbiome shift. But modern food systems do not tolerate adaptation periods. They demand instant satisfaction. The nickname spread. Fart I choke. A joke that killed sales. Even Julia Child wrote about them. Can you fix the flatulence problem? She asked. Yes, cook them longer. Heat converts inulin to fructose. Or eat small amounts. Let your body adjust. But that requires patience and education. Industrial food has neither. So sun chokes remain niche. Farmers' markets, specialty stores, home gardens. And in home gardens they spread. Uncontrollably. Any tuber fragment left in soil sprouts. Any piece thrown in compost grows. You cannot kill sun chokes without chemical poison. In Europe, they are listed as invasive where they escape cultivation. Invasive. The word we use for things that succeed without permission, things that do not need us. Things that remind us control is an illusion. But this uncontrollable spread is exactly the point. You cannot patent a plant that replants itself. You cannot force farmers to buy seed every year. You cannot create dependence. The sun choke teaches what empires want buried. Abundance does not require control. Perennials return without permission, without inputs, without corporate approval. They adapt, persist, outlast. But crops that persist without generating profit are dangerous to a system built on selling inputs. The sun choke out yields potatoes, heals soil, feeds communities without middlemen, survives climate chaos, and it cannot be patented, cannot be owned, cannot generate perpetual revenue. So it is called primitive, difficult, unsuitable, The pattern repeats throughout history. Amaranth was banned by Spanish conquistadors, not because it failed, because it was too sacred to indigenous peoples. Growing, it was an act of resistance. Tepary beans were erased by machines that could not handle their vines. Mesquite was cleared for cattle ranching. Fava beans were replaced by synthetic fertilizers and pills that cost $500 for what grows free in gardens. Indigenous crops that enable food sovereignty are systematically erased. Not because they fail to feed people, because they succeed without creating dependence. The sunchoke survived by being unkillable, but most people alive today have never tasted one, have never seen it grow, have never learned that planting 3 tubers in October yields 30 by April. That knowledge waits underground. Climate change is accelerating, droughts longer, floods stronger, heat records breaking every year. The crops feeding 8 billion people were bred for stable climates. That stability is ending. Wheat fails above certain temperatures. Corn needs consistent rain. Potatoes rot in floods. The sunchoke was born in chaos. Bred by nature through ice ages and droughts. It stores energy underground where heat cannot destroy it. It survives cold that kills potatoes. It produces food using 1/3 the water of corn. When industrial agriculture fails, and it will fail in many regions, the sunchoke will be ready. It has been ready for 400 years. You want to know what they do not teach in schools? How to recognize the sunchoke growing wild. Because it is everywhere. Roadsides from Quebec to Texas. Abandoned lots in Detroit. Riverbanks in Oregon. Ditches across Europe. 8 to 10 feet tall in late summer. Yellow flowers facing east at dawn, west at dusk. Thick stalks like bamboo. Leaves rough as sandpaper. Most people drive past it daily and never know they are looking at free food. Thousands of calories waiting in soil nobody owns. The tubers form after the first frost. That is the trigger. Cold converts the inulin to sugars, making them sweeter. Dig them any time from October to March. They store best in the ground, not in your refrigerator. Cold earth is the perfect storage. Take what you need, leave the rest. They will wait. This is technology our ancestors understood. Food that stores itself. No electricity, no canning, no freezing. Just dirt and time. Plant them in the worst part of your yard, the corner where grass will not grow. Compacted soil, partial shade, sunchokes do not care. Push tubers 4 inches deep, 1 foot apart, walk away. By June, they will be 3 feet tall. By August, 8 feet. A living privacy fence. By October, flowers will fade and stalks will yellow. That is when you dig. Use a garden fork, not a shovel. Shovels cut tubers in half. Forks lift them gently. You will find clusters. 20 tubers where you planted 1, 30 where you planted 2. Every fragment left behind becomes next year's crop. You cannot stop it. This is permanence in a world designed for obsolescence. But here is what they do not tell you. The same characteristic that makes sunchokes perfect for survival makes them illegal in some contexts. Several Australian states classify them as noxious weeds. New Zealand restricts sale and transport, not because they harm ecosystems, because they spread beyond control, because once established, they cannot be removed without industrial herbicides. Think about that. A food crop so successful it is banned. A plant so resilient it is classified as dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Not to hungry people. To systems that require dependence. In 1990, researchers at the University of Guelph in Canada ran trials. They wanted to breed a better sunchoke. Larger tubers, uniform size, less knobby. They succeeded. The new varieties, Stampede and Clearwater, produced tubers twice the size. Smooth skin, easier to clean, perfect for industrial agriculture. But something went wrong, not with the plant, with the economics. Farmers needed contracts before planting, processors needed volume guarantees, grocery chains needed year-round supply. Nobody would commit. The superior varieties existed, but no infrastructure formed around them. Because infrastructure requires investment, and investment requires profit projections. Perennial crops that replant themselves do not generate recurring seed sales. The business model failed where the plant succeeded. Compare this to potatoes. Global seed potato sales exceed $5 billion annually. Farmers cannot save seed potatoes legally if they are patented varieties, and most commercial varieties are patented. Monsanto, now Bayer, controls significant portions through genetic modification and licensing. You buy seed every year, you sign contracts, you surrender autonomy. This model works for corporations. It fails for resilience. The sunchoke cannot be captured this way. Wild genetics. Open pollinated. Thousands of varieties exist: purple, white, red, gold, each adapted to local conditions over centuries. You cannot patent what anyone can dig from a roadside. You cannot license what spreads without permission, so it remains outside the system, marginal, forgotten, exactly where things that threaten centralized control end up. They want you to believe survival is complicated, that you need experts, products, subscriptions. But your great-grandparents knew different. They kept root cellars, saved seeds, grew perennials that did not ask permission. That knowledge was systematically dismantled. Not violently, economically. Convenience replaced competence. Supermarkets replaced skills. Now 3 generations have passed who cannot grow food, cannot preserve food, cannot recognize food growing wild 10 feet from their door. We did not lose the sunchoke. We just stopped looking. But forgetting is not permanent. The knowledge lives in soil, in wild patches along roadsides, in escaped tubers behind abandoned farms, in every gardener who plants 3 and harvests 30. This crop teaches through persistence, through refusal to die. Abundance was always here, growing in dirt, spreading without permission. Free. If this vault opened your eyes, subscribe now and hit the bell. Every share preserves what they tried to erase. The powers that control food want you dependent. This plant offers the opposite: freedom, sovereignty, food that cannot be taken. Plant it once. Feed yourself forever. The next vault opens soon. Do not miss it.